Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Hellbent. Chapters... What chapters did I do this time, actually? That's a good question. I lose track of these. Chapters 33... No. Yes. 33 through 37. Y'all, so much happens. I don't even know where to start. But suffice to say, there has been a demon roaming around this whole time, as it turns out. And low-key, I was thinking that this was something that was going to be potentially unleashed if things went wrong. But it was just happening already. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Joanna for commissioning this episode. What's up, Joanna, if you're out there? So, this section is the restoration of Darlington section, except that even though that is, like, technically what happens, you really don't feel like you get him back exactly because so much has changed and he is struggling so much with the return to his body. And the return to his body doesn't feel like the right way to say that, but you get what I'm saying. Like, return to humanity? Is that even quite true? Like, I'm not really sure what to call it, but it's very clear that he has seen some shit. And from the way he's behaving, I don't believe he intends to ever tell anybody about what he has seen and done. Whether that's something that stays, you know, maybe eventually he will reach a point with Alex where he'll tell her in exchange for her telling him. I also am sort of wondering, like, how much he knows about what Alex has done anyway, by virtue of the fact of having been, like, first a demon, then secondly, like, connected to her in the way that he was, because she winds up recovering his soul by carrying it inside of her, because that box she had brought to carry it breaks. Y'all, talk about a really, like, hopeless moment. That moment where that box broke, I got really upset. I should have realized that the way that this was going to go, but, you know, in the moment, I'm not thinking about that, and it just bummed me the fuck out. So, all right, let's start this off. This starts with 33. Alex waited for Eitan and Zvi to disappear into the big black Suburban idling by the curb. She should have noticed it, but she'd been focused on the wrong threats. So she has just wrapped up her conversation with these two and made this deal with Eitan that she's going to deal with Linus in exchange for getting out of the situation, which I've said already, I am not entirely sure I trust. And she has a moment here of just kind of melting down a little bit and realizing the fact that he found her here, of all places, that he was able to find her, it's just, you know, she had said she was considering a move to the Northeast with her boyfriend, and she had thought he had sort of bought it. But either he straight up didn't believe it, or the fact that, you know, there was the mention of the Northeast gave him a clue. And she's starting to wonder, like, if he knows enough about me to track me down here, what else does he know? What other things could he use against me? So this is when her demon, it's like right there. It's all over. It's all slipping away. How long did you think you could keep pretending? And Alex realizes that this moment of hopelessness, of feeling like, oh my God, I can't believe he found me. There is what I am comparing this to mentally is that once she starts getting into this frame of mind, it creates a sort of scent in the air, like passing by a Cinnabon. for example, just to give a for instance of like an irresistible scent that really has a big impact on me when I smell it, but it draws the creature because it feeds on this. And it's a really awful moment here because first of all, I should mention that this demon's got her tattoos are starting to show up, like, because she's taking on Alex's appearance, which really, truly, again, I can't emphasize enough how rude it feels to take on the appearance of the person you're tormenting. But finally, Alex says, those don't belong to you. And she uses her tongue to try and pull the snakes out. And they come out, but the demon doesn't back away as quickly as it did before. And there's sort of a feeling almost of like the snakes not, I won't say that they're not like doing their job, but we saw earlier how they don't seem to react unless Alex has managed to kind of get her head in the game. If she's still feeling hopeless and helpless, they kind of freeze up a little bit. So here comes Trip saying, leave her alone. And I love this so much. He pulls out his albatross and the demon cringes away with a high-pitched whimper. But she was smiling as she scuttled back to the crowded street. And why not? Her belly was full. And I really appreciated Trip in this moment. There is just, I am fascinated by Trip as a character in a way that I really didn't expect. And I am extremely interested in seeing what happens with him. Because I had said before, I feel like Trip could turn into a pretty good person if people invested some time in him in a real way. I don't know what that would look like. And, you know, I'm not trying to say it's anybody's job to make him better, but he has potential, you know, and there's a whole conversation. I'll get there. But anyway, they're talking about like, the fact that he has been being followed by Spencer still. And she's noticing that Trip looks sunken and like he hasn't been eating, which is also sort of how Turner looks later. And obviously whatever this is like feeding on them in such a way that it seems to be pulling their life force out of them in a way that I should have put together could potentially be like what happened to that professor. Now, she had been aged, and I wasn't really sure if that was how it would go, but I should have realized. So they're passing this restaurant, and they're looking for homemade soup in order to sort of help with what's going on with them. And she calls Dawes, asks if there's a black Suburban there because she's wondering if Eitan and Svi have gone there. And when she's talking to Dawes about it, Dawes starts to mention Black Elm, and Alex immediately is like late for the preater, and she just hangs up on her. And we get this little bit about how she knows it's her turn to go and deal with Black Elm, but she just can't face it right now. So let's see. It's not Spencer. You keep saying that, but what difference does it make? We have to remember what they are. They're not the people we know. They're just hungry. It's Spencer. I can't explain it. I know what you're saying, but it's not just the shit he says. It's that he's enjoying it. And this is when she says, I'm really sorry I got you into this. And she finally confesses, like, you know that we weren't going to fucking, like, make trouble for you, right? Like, I was lying. And he says, yeah, no, I knew, but you offered money and I didn't have any or not enough. And honestly, I don't know what to do with myself. My friends all have jobs. I'm here kicking around, but don't have a degree. And I'm not even sure that I want one. And Darlington needed help and I like the guy. And I don't know, I just felt like kind of doing the right thing. And I really appreciated this because there has been a sense for me of like how even somebody like Tripp, who is so accepting a lot of the time of a punishment because that is like the way his world can tend to work, is like you fuck up, then we're going to demand something of you. I was sort of waiting for him to be like, doesn't this whole thing seem like an extreme punishment for me just trespassing on Skull and Bones property? And it never really does come up. So the fact that he has his own reasons for going along with this, I kind of needed that, and I don't think I realized it. So she goes to the Praetor, and this is a really weird moment that takes Alex so long to figure out. Obviously, I had already started to suspect that Anselm hadn't talked to him based on the fact that that he didn't mention anything about disciplinary action over the phone. There was a vibe for me very much of like, he wouldn't be using the language he is or going through the channels that he is if he knew that there was a problem. And Alex takes an extraordinary long time to realize that he has no idea about anything that happened and that Anselm did not come and talk to her. So what he thinks he's meeting with her about is the wolf run at the Sleeping Giant Park. They would transform as a pack and have the full run of the park. They weren't allowed to attempt flight this early in the school year because there had been so many injuries. But Alex assumed the ritual would be put on hold until, well, she hadn't thought about what Lethe would do with he would do. So I'm going to reread that part. Well, she hadn't thought about what Lethe would do with no Dante and no Virgil. She assumed Michelle Alameddine would be asked to come back. And this is a good moment to mention that despite knowing some of what's been going on, we don't actually have any idea about Michelle's connection with everything, as far as I know. And I'm sort of wondering if she's been seeing Anselm, who she thinks is Anselm. If that's part of what's going on here, is that like, you know what I mean? And I don't know how, I don't know. I really don't, but I don't know how that would tie into anything. So finally she realizes what's going on and that he doesn't know. And she's like, all right, I've got to find out what's happening to Anselm. But I also have to go and see this prisoner that Turner wants me to meet. And she has a talk with Dawes as she's waiting for Turner. And she says, see if you can find out if he's been home. And Dawes says, how am I supposed to do that? Call his house, pretend you work with him. Alex, God damn it, Dawes, do I have to do all of this myself? If this is unethical, then yes. I really am curious about where Dawes draws the line, because finding out whether a man has been home by simply pretending to work with him feels like so very minimally unethical as to be almost a joke to me that she would put up a fuss about it. I don't know. It was just a weird moment that I was like, really, girl? That's what you're hung up about? Is that like, well, I can't lie. Like, come on, Dawes, get with the fucking program. You want to get your friend together and get him out of fucking hell, and you don't want to lie about things. Like, get over it. Honestly, get over it. So she is, she goes to the hospital with Turner to meet this guy. And again, Turner looks like absolute shit. And this dude, oh God, on the way, I forgot about this part. Turner talks about how the demon turned into his grandfather. And how he wanted so badly to believe in a miracle that he allowed himself to think it was really him for a minute. And I gotta tell you, this is the sort of thing that I can't really imagine. Like, I've lost my grandmother and I've lost my father. And there's a part of me that can sort of understand in a vacuum, seeing the person that you miss and love standing in front of you and wanting to be like, that's them. But they're in such a position with this thing that can shapeshift that I have a really hard time understanding how you can set aside your knowledge of that and let yourself go with this illusion because of your desire for this person to still be alive despite everything. Like, I just, and that's not to say that people wouldn't react this way. It's just really difficult for me because my immediate reaction at seeing somebody that I know is supposed to be dead would be panic. It would never be, oh my God, it's my grandma. Like, and I say that fully acknowledging that the idea of something that can shapeshift into someone so convincingly, maybe I would have a different reaction than I think if I were to see somebody who looked and moved exactly like my grandmother. Maybe I would react very differently than I think I would. But just my initial thought here was like, really, Turner? Like, I almost called him Tucker. But anyway, he quotes a Bible verse, and his grandfather doesn't really have any reaction. And he realizes it's not him because his grandfather was just such a Bible guy. And Turner, even when he's realizing this isn't him, he doesn't want to use his defensive spell. And when I turned on him, he looked scared and confused. And finally, he just breaks down. And he doesn't fully start sobbing, but it's the closest Alex has ever seen of him being emotional. And I really love this part. Every time Turner got biblical, she felt uneasy, as if he was telling her about some grand hallucination, and it was her job to nod sagely and pretend she saw miracles too. Then again, she'd spent her whole life seeing things no one else did. Maybe she could extend him the benefit of the doubt. And I really appreciated this moment because it is a struggle that I think a lot of us deal with, whether or not we believe in God or not. If you're talking to somebody who has a very specific faith that you just don't get, keeping your mouth shut sometimes can be tricky. Or somebody who believes in, say, if you're not into astrology or tarot and you have a friend who is, there's an urge to mock it. And I personally struggle with this and have learned how to try and respect when people are talking about something that I don't believe, as long as it doesn't seem like it's harming anyone. Mostly because of my mom and everything that she believes. I was about to use the word fall for. See? You see what I'm saying? So I just kind of appreciated this moment. So, all right, this guy that they meet in the hospital, I really felt for this guy because he's it's obvious that he wasn't intending what he did. And he is talking about how he wanted the point of this is that these these other professors had ruined his father's reputation and that he wanted to humiliate them. And Alex prompts him along the path of admitting that he wanted revenge and to deal out humiliation also. But then is like, but you didn't want to kill him. And he says, no, I didn't. And let's see. Here it is. Let's see, who told you? Because Turner is asking him about the code to follow, like to get into Dean Beekman's home and their schedules and stuff, and how he knew where they'd be. Who told you? Now Andy hesitated. My dad? Did he know you planned to hurt these people? No. He just handed you his key and rattled off their work schedules for fun? He didn't rattle off anything. The Ram told me. Andy smacked his lips, scraping his tongue over his teeth as if he didn't like the taste of the word. Alex stayed very still. The Ram? Andy rolled his eyes. It wasn't a look of contempt. There was something wild in the movement, like an animal caught in a trap, straining to get free. Even so, his voice was reasonable. It wasn't a big deal to find them, to get them to let me in. I've spent most of my life at Yale, okay? And what about Marjorie Stevens? She cost my father everything, and over what? Someone else's mistake? They went too far. He could have handled losing his job, but he became a joke. And you wanted to humiliate them. Yes, but you didn't want to kill them. No, of course not. Turner's eyes narrowed. But you did kill them. Andy nodded, then shook his head, as if he was a mystery to himself. I did. He made it easy. The Ram? Alex asked. Andy's eyelids fluttered rapidly. He was kind. Yeah? Easy to talk to. He knew so much. About what? This town, the people here. He knew so many stories. He had all of the answers. But he didn't lord it over me, you know? He just wanted to help, to make things right. He was polite. A real gentleman, Alex finished for him. Alex thought of Darlington's horns curled back from his forehead, glowing behind the protection of the golden circle. But maybe the circle had been an illusion. Maybe Darlington had let them believe it kept him at bay when it had been nothing more than fairy dust. And Alex gets up and sprints the fuck out of there. So then we go to part 2, So Below, and we are back in the basement at Black Elm, and with the grays of his parents. And this is just, guys, I had this exact same thing happen in the last book, where we open in media res, and then we flash back to months beforehand. And that time as well, when we come back to the present and what was happening in the prologue of the book, I'm startled that it happened this soon, because I keep expecting to pick up at the very end of the book and it be like a bookend sort of thing, but that's not the way she's doing things. So, Alex is, I love this. In the cold dark of the basement, Alex took stock of her mistakes. She should have stayed with Turner and finished the interview with Andy Lambton. She shouldn't have come to Black Elm alone. She should have told Dawes her suspicions, or Turner, or anyone. She never should have trusted her gentleman demon. But she'd wanted to believe that Darlington would be okay, that whatever he'd endured in hell wouldn't leave a mark, that she could be forgiven and order restored. He would make the whole thing, he would be made whole, and she alongside him. But what if she was leaping to the wrong conclusions now? What if not Helly or one of the other demons had pushed her down the stairs? And let's see. How long have you been here? She asked them. Daniel's eyes darted to the corner as if he expected something to appear through the walls. I don't know. Harper nodded in agreement. You can't get out? He told us to stay. Who? They said nothing. And she looks down and sees that the claw marks going down their bodies has torn their hearts out through like their ribs. And when she asks who did it, Harper says he was our son, but not our son. And Daniel's looking over in the corner and says he left that there. He said it could happen to us too. He said he would eat our lives. And Alex is looking in the corner, but trying not to. And eventually she does and realizes that it's a body, but it's like a dried husk. And let's see, the screen hung on Dawes' number. Service at Black Elm was sketchy at best and non-existent underground. What was waiting for her up there? So she says to them now, who wants to help us get out of here? And fucking Daniel says, you can bring us back to life? And I love this. So the Arlington brains had skipped a generation. I just love that line. Like the fact that he leaps to this conclusion and Harper offers to go with her. And Daniel is like, don't leave me alone down here. And Alex is like, fine. Okay, I'll take both of you. And that honestly weirdly made sense to me because they seem like a package deal somehow. And she feels like she's standing in the middle of a party and she's getting all of these like mixed memories. And there's, oh man, she was watching an old man walk with that same little boy. He loved them both. He hated them both. He hated his own father, his own son. If he could just get a foothold, if he could just find his way to a little luck, he wouldn't have to feel like this, like a nobody when he was in Arlington. And God, this is just such a thing with so many people. Like they constantly, because of their own incompetence, wind up failing and they think that they just have really bad luck or that people all underestimate them. And like, don't get me wrong. There are times where you can just have bad luck, but there are through lines and patterns that you should start to be able to see if you have any self-awareness. And it's just really clear that he doesn't. So she runs up the stairs and pushes on the door, like with the strength of these two grays inside her. And she hits right into Anselm. And she's like, what are you doing here? And to be honest, you guys, I wasn't putting it together myself initially. And Anselm says, what's going on? And she says, a lot, but you're not in the business of solving my problems, right? And then all of a sudden there's this boom. And she recognizes it, something banging on a door that should never be opened. What the hell did you do, Alex? Stop, we have to go. You don't know what you're dealing with. And you do? So she grabs him and spins him around. And he realizes how strong she is and kind of takes a second look at her. And all of a sudden the ceiling caves in. This is really quite a moment, you guys. I was not expecting this. Like, I don't know if the building is destroyed or if Black Elm is still like mostly there or what. It's the ballroom floor, you know, and it's hard for me to keep a picture of the size of this place in my head. But anyway, Darlington is there crouching in the wreckage and he's growling. And at first, Alex puts herself between Darlington and Anselm. And she's trying to tell Anselm to run. And he's still play acting that he doesn't know what's going on. And is like, well, what is he? What is it? Is that Daniel Arlington? This is an abomination. You have the advantage. Stop him now. And then Anselm says, for once in your life, think stern. And Anselm says, send that monster back to hell and I'll find a way to get you back into Lethe. But why would Darlington want to go back to his prison, and how did Anselm know about the circle of protection? Think, Stern. To Anselm, she'd always been Alex, Miss Stern, when he was angry. It was Darlington who had called her Stern. She remembered when Anselm had told her the story of the 3 judges, how much he'd reminded her of Darlington. Darlington without magic, without Black Elm, without a soul. She remembered how surprised she'd been when he asked about her mother. Does she embarrass you? The wave of shame that had overtaken her, how exhausted she'd felt after that meeting. She remembered Anselm stretching in the sunlight like a well-fed cat. I feel almost human. Oh, man, you guys, it was right there. I love the way that Leigh Bardugo can write a character that feels just a little off, enough to make you kind of go, what's up with this person? But not quite enough to make you, like, actively suspicious of them. You know? Because, like, I felt like there was a thing going on with Bellbaum, but it wasn't nearly enough for me to put her in connection with the crimes. It was more like she's got her own little side story maybe happening that we'll find out about. It just never occurred to me to put her, you know what I'm saying? So this whole moment here, it felt very similar again, because I was like, something's up with this guy Anselm. He's being weird. And it felt like he was even hitting on her. And I was like, what is this? And now I'm like, oh my God, I'm so irritated with the fact that I didn't pick up on any of this. So she pulls her salt snakes. They leapt. The salt snakes seemed to pop and sizzle in the heat, exploding in a hail of sparks. Well, I had hoped you'd do the killing. I wanted to watch you torment yourself over the murder of your beloved mentor for a while. And Alex is like, oh, you're his demon. You hitched a ride when we tried to bring Darlington out of hell the first time, when Dawes and I botched the ritual at Scroll and Key, and you've been fucking with us ever since. You killed Darlington's parents. They showed up at Black Elm while I was trying to figure out how to get my lesser half out of that cursed circle. But Anselm hadn't been able to feed on Darlington in the mortal realm because he was protected by the circle, so the demon had needed to take on another form. You killed Michael Anselm, too. And this is why she's realizing Anselm just seemed like so different. You know, he had been somebody who was a rule follower and very uptight, and then somebody all of a sudden who was like having a good time and kind of relaxed and charming. And the murders, she's like, so those were just distractions. A game, Anselm corrected with a gentle smile. A puzzle. 2 people died, and Andy Lambton is in a psych ward. It was a good game. Oh my God, there is something about that. Like, yeah, I know. Pretty solid, right? Jesus Christ. And that makes sense also why he like interrupted the gauntlet, because I had sort of thought, isn't it wild that somebody in his position would interrupt the gauntlet when he knows what they're doing and how dangerous it is, and doesn't he realize? But I just sort of figured he didn't understand fully, and he wasn't taking it seriously that it had like worked. And now again, it all makes a lot more sense. Let's see. The lure was right in front of me all along. I just had to put his damsel in distress. Of course he came running. And now the task is simple. A blazing orange arc of fire burst forward. Alex felt it sizzle past her shoulder, singeing the flesh. It struck Darlington head on. And she is jumping forward, trying to use the strength of the Greys to defend. And she breaks his neck, but he just smiles and straightens his neck up again. She throws salts at him, and that does do something, but the salt snakes like really did not seem to do much of anything. And let's see. Oh, but they pile on him. I forgot that they do this. Hold him, she begged, though she had no idea if they understood. So they lay over him while she goes and deals with Darlington. And he says, the box. I'll hold on as long as I can. Get to hell. Bring my soul back. And it turns out that the circle is a doorway that she can walk through as a wheel walker. And all of a sudden she's realizing that Darlington had been sort of arguing with her about the gauntlet because she didn't need the gauntlet to get to hell, but she didn't understand. So she goes through the portal and she finds Darlington on the other side. Trust me one last time. Trust me to get us out of here. But the look on his face was one of terror. Too late, she realized it was a warning. Something slammed into her back. The box flew from her hands. It was like watching movement underwater. Time slowed. The box arced through the air and struck the ground. It shattered. And she is screaming, scrabbling for it, and she gets turned over. And it's a rabbit standing there. And I am so confused about this rabbit. Like, I still don't feel like I get what the symbolism here is. And the Babbitt rabbit thing I had thought was a memory of Helly's. And I'm feeling like I got my wires crossed because she was in the middle of remembering Helly's, or she was in the middle of Helly's memories when the Babbitt rabbit thing sort of comes up. So I'm wondering if it was like partially her memory mixed in there. I don't know. But anyway, it starts asking her how she crossed the circle because this thing doesn't get what she is or understand. And I love this. She is finally looking around and realizing this thing is telling her like, oh, you're empty now. What are you going to do with your stolen strength, without your stolen strength? And she's thinking about how she is empty and then is putting it together that, wait, maybe that means I can hold his soul. And then we get this moment. Come on along, she whispered. Darlington dropped the rock. His soul flooded into her like golden light, new leaf green, morning bright, the sweet vibration of the cello's bow, the ringing triumphant sound of steel on steel. Her body erupted into white flame, searing, blinding. Don't you just wish you knew what your soul smelled and sounded and tasted like? Like, I want to know so bad. I really do. So she runs through the circle and she winds up back in Black Elm. And there's a moment where she's just so overwhelmed at the strength of having his spirit inside of her and is realizing like how intoxicating this is, and sort of for the first time getting why this became sort of an addiction for Bell Balm. Let's see. The monstrous rabbit was gone, and Anselm was a man once more, though he was singed where Alex's fire had burned him. And then we get this great bit, guys. He leapt over her toward Darlington, orange flames streaking from his fingertips, but fell into a crouch, hissing, held at bay by Cosmo. The cat had come yowling down the stairs, his fur on end, aglow with white light. Darlington's protector. How long had that cat been watching over the owners of this house? Was he a salt spirit or something else entirely? Anselm shrieked, rocking back and forth on his heels and hands. He had never looked less human. And y'all, I was like, for a moment was thinking that it was the cat that they, like the little figurine. And I was like, how did that work? They weren't able to give that to him for him to integrate it. And then the fact that it was just like straight up Cosmo, it just very, very interested in what Cosmo is. I'm delighted with Cosmo. So she says, go, and she releases his spirit, his soul, and he slips back into his body, and Cosmo howled as the demon let loose a torrent of fire that engulfed Darlington. And Alex just runs at him, even though she doesn't have a plan. And all of a sudden is realizing that, like, the power that she had when she took Darlington's soul into her, the pain that she had from her ribs being broken and whatnot, it doesn't seem to be there anymore. So she crashes into him, and he's got his hands around her throat, and he is starting to strangle her. But when she looks over at Darlington, she realizes that the jeweled yoke around his neck is gone. And her blue fire begins up again, and it's like running up and down his arms, and he shrieks, and then Darlington calls his name Golgarot. The thing that towered over her on the stairs was both more and less like Darlington. His voice sounded right, the echo gone, but horns still curled back from his temples, and his body looked too big, not entirely human. His markings had changed too. The symbols were gone, but there were golden bands around his wrists and neck and ankles. And Anselm yells murderer, liar, matricide, which I was like, does that matricide on him? Like, maybe, what would you call it if it's grand patricide? I don't know how that would work, but like, that was a weird one, because I was like, does that count as him? And Darlington grabs him and tears him literally in half. That is just, I can't even be mad. Like, that's just dope as fuck. The demon's flesh gave way as if it were paper, dissolving into a mass of wriggling maggots. Ew. Just ew. Don't like it. His body seemed to shift again, retracting. The horns vanished, the golden bands. He looked mortal. He stood there for a moment, gazing at Anselm's remains, then turned and started up the stairs. Darlington, where are you going? To get some clothes, Stern. A man can spend only so much time without trousers on before he begins to feel like a deviant. What a great line. Honestly. Truly. Delightful. And then we get our final chapter in this section, where Darlington's perspective is back. And I was so excited about this, especially because it caught me by surprise in the audiobook, because I don't know if I've actually mentioned this, but the audiobook chapters that are from Darlington's perspective have a male narrator. And, you know, a lot of audiobooks from different perspectives, whether it's a female or male character, they have the same narrator and it's not switched up. And I have no problem with that. I don't feel like I've got a particular preference necessarily. But when I heard the narrator for Darlington show up, I was suddenly like, wow, didn't really like realize how long it had been since I heard his voice, because the last book, you know, he's gone about halfway through. So he is like thinking about the transition back into his body. And I have to be honest, you guys, I'm not fully understanding the fact that he looked so demonic and had like, you know, the shackles for his wrists and whatnot and horns. And then that all like disappeared after killing that other demon. Like, are those things still kind of there, but just hidden somehow? I'm not fully getting what he is now, and if he is just himself, and why the killing of that other demon would have done that to him. I feel like I missed something, or maybe I'm not supposed to get it yet. I don't know. And he's looking around Black Elm and realizing that he doesn't have the pleasure associated with being here that he feels like he should have and that he would have had a while ago. And let's see, maybe because Alex had freed his soul, but some part of him would be forever trapped in hell, carrying rock after rock, setting stone upon stone, begging to stop, to rest, but unable to. There'd been no boredom, no sense of repetition. He'd been desperate the whole time, a man trying to revive a corpse, trying to breathe life into a body gone cold, looking for some sign of hope, sure that every single stone was the one that would bring Black Elm back to glory. There was more, of course. He had been many things in hell. A jailer and jailed, torturer and tortured. But he wasn't ready to think about that, and he was only relieved that there were some secrets he could still keep from Galaxy Stern. And I just am thinking, yeah, we'll see about that, buddy. I just feel like it's a matter of time, and some of that stuff is going to start to surface. And he's looking down at her and thinking about how bad he wants to fuck her, basically. And is like, God, I shouldn't be having these thoughts. Is it because I'm like, just, you know, basically back from prison, or is this leftover stuff from the demon? And I love, he was glad his erection wasn't glowing like a New England lighthouse anymore, which truly, small favors. His parents were dead, and in a way, he had killed them. Golgoroth had fed on his soul in hell, dined on his shame and hopelessness. He'd eaten Darlington's memories and the worst of his sadness and need. He had killed Michael Anselm for the sake of his plans, an expedient means to an end, but killing Darlington's parents would have delighted him, not just because Anselm drew satisfaction from pain, but because some shriveled, bitter part of Darlington wanted them to die, and die badly, and Golgoroth knew it. And I fucking felt that. Like, the idea of doing something that the worst part of you secretly does kind of want. Oh, yikes. That is just a... And he has to sort of take a moment and collect himself. And it's like, man, I feel like if I think about anything for too long, I'm going to completely lose it. He would keep moving. Think about the bag, pick it up. Think about the door, open it. Think about each step he was taking down the hall. These were safe things to gather around him. The patch of squirming maggots Anselm had left behind should have repelled him, but maybe it was his demon skin that refused to crawl. Alex was waiting in the kitchen eating dry cereal from a box. She was the same too. Skinny, sallow, ready to take a swing at anything that looked at her wrong. And he's thinking about, I have been crying out to you from the start. And they just stand and stare at each other. She was more beautiful than he remembered. No, that wasn't true. It wasn't that she had changed or that his vision had sharpened. He was just less afraid of her beauty now, which was an interesting way to say that. Like, was he afraid of it because he didn't want to be drawn to somebody of like her pedigree before? I wasn't really sure what that meant. And let's see. Oh, right. I forgot about this. When he says, I need to see their bodies. And she just says, okay, their car's in the garage, because they're kind of talking now about how they're going to hide this, what they're going to do. You don't have to go with me. Good. Darlington was tempted to laugh. Alex Stern had gone to hell twice for him, but the basement was a step too far. And he goes down there and he's looking at their bodies and doesn't know what to say. And finally just says, "Death fucks us all," in Latin. He can't think of anything else. And he climbs back up the stairs and she says, "I need to know what to tell Dawes. Are you ready to be back?" "I don't know that it matters. Perhaps it would be best to explain in person." "Did you see them, my parents, after?" "Yeah, they helped me get out." "Do they think I killed them?" "Sort of." "Are they here now?" Of course not. He knew better than that. And he's just sort of like trying to adjust to everything. There's a lot happening here in his head that's like clashing. And she says something about how she can hear his grandfather, and he feels this wave of envy, and he doesn't understand how he can be so envious of her after like everything that he has been through. "They never shut up," she added. "She's trusting me," he told himself. Alex was handing him knowledge that he knew with complete certainty Lethe didn't have. Another offering. He found he was as greedy for her trust as her power. He pushed those thoughts away. What is he saying? He says to be free, that you've given up enough blood to this place. It's yours to take or leave. It always should have been. Darlington snorted. "You're lying." What did he really say? Alex shrugged and met his eyes. "That Black Elm needs you more than ever, that this is your home by right of blood and treasure, and a lot of rambling about the Arlington legacy." That sounds much more like him. And that moment just really killed me. The idea that he's like finally going to let you go, and that's absolutely not how it went. I mean, that feels much more accurate to life. That's all I'm saying. So he says, "I'll be back. Better to flee from death than feel its grip," he quoted, letting the death words cast the old man out, a peace offering to Alex of his own. "I don't know what to do about their bodies." He couldn't quite manage to say their bodies. "We have bigger problems." "Why don't we have the Mercedes? What happened to my car?" Long story. And they go outside and take a second, and she asks if he's okay. And he says, "I'm fine," even though he is absolutely not. But she just says good. And I'm like, she has to know that he's not, but they don't have time to talk about this right now. I have good news and bad news. Bad news first, please. We have to go back to hell. I see. And the good news? Dawes is making avgolemono. Well, that's a relief. Y'all, is this that, like, lemon soup? There was some soup that I remember them saying was his favorite. I have never heard this, and I'm going to look it up right now. A Greek lemon chicken soup, yes, with lemon egg sauce. This is really, like, I'm not going to lie, you guys, this is the sort of recipe that I feel like sounds unappealing, but when you look at a picture of it, it looks like a really yummy, rich chowder. So now I'm kind of like, I don't know, this sounds really good. And it's got a lot of rice. So let's see. I'm looking at, just for shits and giggles, Food and Wine. 4 cups chicken stock, salt and pepper, 2 cups cooked white rice, 2 large egg yolks, 1/4 cup and 2 tablespoons fresh lemon juice, rotisserie chicken with the meat pulled from the bones and coarsely shredded, and 1/4 cup of chopped fresh dill. That sounds really simple, but I don't know. I'm going to try this, I think. I'm going to try making it and just be like, hey, what's up, Darlington? I got your fave over here. But you guys, yeah, I just wasn't expecting this to go at all the way it did. I feel like I still don't really have a grasp on what happened exactly. Like the mention of his demon skin not crawling, and I'm like, does that mean he is still a demon? Kind of like, what exact, I don't know. And what they're going to do with the bodies, how they are going to like cover this up. The only thing I can think is that somehow Black Elm like burns down, but I think Black Elm is magical somehow. I don't think that they're going to get away from it, or that Darlington will get away from it. And I feel really bad for this man in the fucking psych ward. He did commit the murders, so it's not like he's innocent, but the whole thing was so manipulated, and I really feel for the guy. It's like, look, he was gonna do something like fucked up, but like not murder, for Christ's sake. And I really don't want to go back to hell, because I had kind of forgotten they have to go back in order to close that door, and was thinking, oh good, she got his soul back and brought it to him. Now we're done. And we're just super duper not done, actually. Not even close. And I'm wondering whether or not going back and somehow closing the door, like, that won't get rid of Linus, right? They have to figure out another way to handle him. I don't even know if closing the door after the cows have gone. I mean, these demons are already in our world. So how do you lure them back into hell? How does that even work? I don't know. I have no theories. So I'm really interested to see where this goes. And something that I sort of like skipped over because I wasn't sure how much time I'd have, but I have another extra like minute. I really was fascinated by the moments in the walk from the car to meeting the guy in the hospital, when Alex is remembering all of the time that she has spent in places like this and the number of people who just didn't believe her, and finally coming across a doctor who has a vibe that makes Alex think maybe this woman will actually believe her. And Alex tells her only the very bare bones of like the truth, and it's already too much. And the lady gets excited and starts talking about like getting her in for electroshock therapy and stuff. And all of these treatments, they wind up not going through because her mother simply can't afford them. But the woman having that sort of like excited reaction, I'm assuming she is just excited to be dealing with a person with this particular kind of delusion. Like, or was she actually trying to trick Alex into telling her something? Just the whole thing, though, it felt so gross. It felt like Alex had been lured into spilling her guts by somebody who had no intention of believing her in either way, But yeah, I did really like that sort of moment of reminding us how much Alex has been like, I sometimes think of her as like, oh, she got in with a bad crowd. She started doing drugs and she basically was just drugged all the time. And no, it was like a weird mixture of running with a bad crowd and using drugs, but also sometimes her mother managing to sort of like grip her up and be like, we are getting you help and you're not arguing with me, and making her go somewhere or do some. And she even talks about, the Scared Straight programs, where it's sort of like supposed to be similar to military school or something, and how that just didn't really like it was just the various scenarios that her mother attempted. I tend to forget that there were multiple tries made, and I just feel bad for her mother. Like, I know that Alex talks about how self-absorbed her mother is, and certainly I believe that's true, even though I don't feel like I've seen a lot of that myself. But the fact that she had tried so many things to help her daughter, I do respect that. She tried. What more was she supposed to do? So the only thing you could say is believe her. But even if she did believe her daughter, I don't like, that doesn't exactly change what Alex is stuck with seeing. and how traumatic it is. I really can't decide. Like, I understand the value of being believed in a general way, and that Alex feeling like somebody believes her, maybe that could have turned things, you know, maybe that's all it was, is if she were believed, it wouldn't have gone for her the way it did her whole life. But I don't know, would that have been enough? She'd have still been stuck with these awful moments. And you know what I keep thinking about too, is the fact that there was a Gray that managed to try and rape her. And what the fuck was that? We still haven't really gotten any explanation as to why it was able to touch her and become like solid at all. So I don't know if that's something that we're going to find out. Well, I or if it's like we've been kind of told why and I haven't really picked up on it. I don't know. But I do keep sort of thinking about that and what could have been happening at that moment because I keep thinking that it was something circumstantial. And I think I mentioned at one point the fact that Alex had her period and wondering if like the presence of blood had something to do with it. But genuinely do not know. Like, I don't know. Anyway, all right. I got to wrap this up, but I can't wait to read more. I'm so excited, you guys. This has been really fun. Thank you all again so much for listening. Thank you, Joanna, for commissioning these episodes. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.